Welcome to the You on the Camino de Santiago podcast. This podcast is for and about first-time pilgrims walking the pilgrimage routes in Spain, France, and Portugal. With your host, guide and longtime pilgrim, Nancy Reynolds of the Camino Experience. It seems as though the default choice for walking the Camino de Santiago these days is to walk either the Francés route or the Portuguese route. Now, that does oversimplify things, but the statistics from the Pilgrim's office in Santiago de Compostela do show that those have been the two most walked routes in recent years. My guest on the podcast this week has walked both those routes, and now he is taking his pilgrimage practice to other, less traveled routes. Hi, this is Nancy, and I'm back this week with my friend Chad, who you have heard from in 3 previous episodes. I've listed those in the show notes in case you'd like to go back and listen to those conversations. What I love about talking with Chad is that he loves the spiritual practice of pilgrimage as much as I do, and it's become a regular part of his life and his family's life. This time, Chad will be sharing what he calls his Connector Camino, which he walked with his 25-year-old daughter and regular pilgrimage partner, Bonnie. What does that mean, Connector Camino? Well, you'll see. But let me give you a heads up. The routes Chad will be talking about have tricky, hard-to-pronounce names, and you may not have heard of them. Also, Chad talks about some lesser-known highlights. So I've got the route and place names in the show notes so you can check them out and start your own research on what may be your next Camino. This conversation was recorded as part of the bi-monthly Tapas Tuesday gathering in our online pilgrim community, La Terraza. So we've got a live audience who are weighing in with questions to take the conversation even deeper. But that does mean that I had 8 audio tracks to edit together for this one, so please bear with me if I missed anything in the editing process. And to learn more about La Terraza, grab the link in the show notes or go to my website, thecaminoexperience.com, and look for the menu item La Terraza. Maybe you'd like to be part of a future live audience. Now, let me just say, if you're tuning into the podcast for the very first time, you are jumping in way into the storyline. You may want to go back to Season 1, Episode 1, and start there to learn about the Camino de Santiago and what decisions you need to make to get your Camino on the calendar. Okay, let's go ahead and catch up with Chad. Chad, hi, welcome back. Thank you for being with me today.
Hi, Nancy. It's so great to be back on the podcast.
What number is this for you? Is this number 3 or 4?
Well, if we're counting, it's 4.
Is it? Okay,
It is
very
4.
good. Very good. I might have to give you the favorite guest award at this point.
I really enjoyed being a part of the podcast and the connections that it's helped me make.
Fabulous. I love that. Do you get recognized out on the trail now?
You know, I have been recognized a couple times because of my voice, and that's just weird for me. But like I said, those interactions are a lot of fun.
Excellent. Very good. Well, we're here today because you have been out and about again on some Camino routes, and it's a little bit different than anything you had done before. So how about we'll put the pin in the map for what you had done before, and then we'll talk about this most recent one, just so we can get the scale of your pilgrimage experience.
So in 2022, I was my first Camino, and that was my wife's idea. We did the Portuguese Central. We started in Lisbon, and our 2 adult daughters went with us. And then I went back the following year and did the Francés, starting in St. John, and walked to Santiago, and then continued on to Musia and Fistera. And then the following year, I went back in 2024, and I went to Porto, and I did the coastal route this time. I did that solo. And then once I got to Santiago, I took a bus up to Oviedo, and my daughter Bonnie joined me to do the Primitivo together. She was not interested in the coast because she'd been in the Navy, and she said she'd seen enough sand, but she loves the mountains. And so she joined me on that Primitivo route. And it was during that trip that we decided we would come back in 2025 and do the Norte together.
Okay.
That had been our plan to do the whole Norte.
Best of intentions. What did you actually do?
Well, that idea got a little bit hijacked because I got the opportunity. I was asked to help lead a breast cancer survivor group. It was supposed to be this coming year on a 2-week Camino, and I was going to have a friend join us to help plan that. So even though I'd walked the Francés before, I did it solo and not really with the idea of having 12 other people with me. So I wanted to go back and walk those 2 weeks and really plan that out, because it would be my first time as a guide. And I
Okay.
had a friend from Boise who's a breast cancer survivor that was going to be joining us. So all of a sudden, I had to figure out how to get from the Norte, which I would be walking on, and get down to Leon and to meet her. And we could have taken a bus or could have flown, I guess. But we looked on the map and found that there was a route that would connect us. And so we looked into that, and I found these two routes, the Levaniego and the Variance, and I probably are not pronouncing those two correctly, but it would get us from the Norte down to just outside of Leon. And so I watched a couple of YouTube videos about that route, and it crossed the Pico de Europa's mountains. And when I showed it to Bonnie, she was sold. And so we kind of went back and forth, even if the breast cancer trip wasn't going to work, back last year, would we continue just to do the whole Norte or not? But we so fell in love with this alternative route that we decided we were going to do it regardless. And we're so glad that we did.
Okay. So, I didn't mention this earlier, but this call is not just you and I, right? We have one, two, three, four, six other people on the call who are our audience and who are going to ask questions once we go through this a little bit. And everyone on the call has walked, I think, either the Portuguese or the Francés route or both, which was your background. So
Yeah.
when you started putting this together, what was the picture in your mind's eye? What were you expecting when you tackled this very interesting itinerary?
Well, I was happy that I wasn't going to be doing it alone. I was glad that Bonnie was going to be doing it with me because I knew that these routes are not traveled as much. And I knew this was going to be the first route that I've done that really I didn't feel was as supported as what I was used to. That wasn't to say there wasn't good support there, but it definitely wasn't what I had experienced on the Frances or the Portuguese. And it was much more physically challenging than any route that I had been on to this point.
Okay. So you mentioned, well, you alluded to at least the infrastructure and what you were expecting in terms of setup. Can you talk a little bit about how these routes were supported? What services, what albergues, what did you encounter?
Yeah, there were albergues in each town. Some of them were hosted, some of them were not hosted. This was the first time that I'd ever shown up into town and walked into the bar and signed in and asked for a key. But that was a great experience. And then walking into the place and finding two other pilgrims that were heading in the opposite direction. And that was a lot of fun. There were notes there that were left from other pilgrims to help us find things around town because there actually was uh, no restaurant. There were no eating facilities in that town. But what we'd learned from a YouTube video, as well as what notes other pilgrims had left there, that the senior center, you could buy a meal from the senior center if you got there within their opening hours. And so that's what we did after we showered is we walked back to the senior center and knocked on the door, and the cook let us in and fixed up two to-go plates for us. And that was our dinner that evening. And it was just fabulous.
And then the rest of the time, was it more similar to what we know as, for example, on the Frances route?
I think so. We definitely were going through mountain trails and mountain passes, and not a lot of places to stop and have coffee con leche along the way. And so, we were a little more careful to make sure that we ate breakfast. I remember when we did the Portuguese, we would get up and just leave and not wait for breakfast because we liked experiencing daybreak and seeing the sunrise come up. And, usually an hour or 2 hours into it, you were at the next town and you could eat breakfast.
Hmm.
That was not the case here. You needed
Okay.
to make sure that you had either set out something for breakfast or bought it to take with you,
Okay.
because there probably wasn't going to be something in a couple of hours. You may have to walk half the day before you found a place to stop.
Okay. Well, that's a physical challenge as well as a bit of a mental challenge anyway for me. Yeah.
It was a little bit of a challenge.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Huh.
But if you know that going into it, you can do what you need to do to make that.
Right. Right. When you shared the names with me this morning when we were chatting, I had never heard of them. Are these two routes considered routes of the Camino de Santiago?
They are, in fact, you can find them on Granze, and
Okay.
but the interesting thing is that was the only web-based service that we were able to find the maps on. All of
Hmm.
the other maps or all of the other apps did not have these routes on them.
Okay. Yeah. The names are completely unfamiliar.
The way that the routes became available is pretty interesting. The first one, the Variance, or I'm sorry, the Laviniego, it is a path that goes from the Norte path from the coast to a monastery. It's a 3 to 5 day walk. And in that monastery, it has the largest piece of of the cross of Christ. It's the left arm of the cross of Christ.
Oh, wow.
And so this has become its own pilgrimage through the years. And there's, I don't know, 3 or 4 different paths to get to this monastery. In fact, what we took after we got to the monastery at the end of the Levaniego, the Variance, we actually were doing it in the opposite direction. That is what connects it to the Norte, but the way it was established was when people were heading the other direction, they were heading north to get to this monastery to see this piece of the cross of Christ.
Okay. What was that like for you to know that you're walking towards that? Was that a significant visit for you to that monastery?
It was. That wasn't the reason we picked this route. We picked it just because of logistical reasons. We were looking for a hiking path that went from the Norte down to the Francés,
Okay.
but knowing that there was this historical, pretty significant artifact in this monastery,
Sure.
um, was pretty interesting. And so it has its own Red Cross markings instead of the yellow arrows. And so you're following a different marking on the way to
Okay.
the monastery. And then after the monastery, you pick the yellow arrows back up to get to Santiago.
Ah,
I was a little surprised at how impacted I was once I got to the monastery and just the peace that I felt there.
oh. And is it up high in the mountains? I'm picturing the Picos de Europa
Yeah,
and so it's not an easy walk to get there. I'm picturing you're not like strolling from Palos de Rey to Malide.
no, it is quite difficult. We were really glad that we had the 2 weeks of walking the Norte before we started out on this route, just because of the physical challenge. The elevation was significant.
Okay.
We were higher than what you would get on the Francés or even the Primitivo.
Okay.
For instance, the Cruz de Ferro is 1,500 meters and Osabrero is 1,300, and we were up at 1,800.
Okay. That's yeah, significant.
So we were up there a little higher.
Okay.
So there was definitely challenges to our legs. So we were glad that the Norte got our legs ready to do this little diversion
It's your
up.
little training program to
That's
get ready
right,
for it.
up into the mountains. Yeah.
So the Francés, the Portuguese, are so well mapped and marked. It's just you have to kind of work to get lost on those routes or really just zone out and not be paying attention. What were some of the logistical or navigational challenges you faced on these less known routes?
Yeah. So the signs were different. The like I said, there was a red cross with kind of glory symbols around it that marked those days that we walked on the Lebaniego. And then we picked up the yellow arrow again, like I said, once we had passed the monastery. However, we found on the Variance, they actually have their own symbol for their route, which includes a horse and a sheaf of wheat and the arrow and the shell, and it's all combined into this really neat image. And the first day that we saw it on the sign, I took a picture of it, and when we finished the route, once we got to Santiago, both Bonnie and I got a tattoo of that image on our calves, and
Uh,
so we have a matching tattoo from this path that we really like.
oh, very sweet. Very sweet. You and Bonnie have covered a lot of kilometers together, haven't you?
We really have. Yeah. And somebody asked me the other day, I've got four children, and somebody asked me, is she your favorite child? And I said, no. I said, I love all of my kids differently, but I will say that having this opportunity these last 5 years to walk these different routes with Bonnie, we have more shared experiences
Hmm.
right now, and it's very easy for us to point back to. And I'm very grateful for those.
I love that. Has it been all smooth sailing? You guys get along perfectly, and what's it like for you two traveling together day after day?
Yeah, we are very good travelers together. I don't know that we have temperaments that fit in well, but
Hmm.
I've read a lot of, biographies of people that have done a Camino, and some of them walk with their family or walk with their kids, and I know that some of them say, well, their kid ran off and they'll meet them in the next town or at the next cafe, and Bonnie and I walk pretty close to each other the whole way, and we find plenty of things to talk about. And that doesn't mean we don't give each other space when we need it. And there's times of silence and processing and everything else. But we've got a similar um, pace, which is nice to have with someone that you're walking with, and
Yeah.
we're interested in each other, and we're good travel companions that way.
No dramatic stories you can share with
Oh,
us?
I definitely have a story. In fact, I I wrote each day at the
Yeah.
end of the trip, and I took a lot of photos, and I made a photo book at the end of it and put my blogs into that. And I was thinking maybe I could read one story of something that I learned together. And this is the day after we had got to the monastery and had seen the cross, and now we were heading up into the Picos de Europa mountains.
Okay, I'd love to hear it.
Right. The phrase "the fix is in" implies that an individual has tampered with something so they can manipulate the outcome or change the results. We tamper with people all the time. Perhaps we don't have malice in our intentions, and we may think we have the person's best interests at heart. But do we? Yesterday, Bonnie fell on a steep, slippery, muddy incline, and I was about 15 yards in front of her on a switchback, and I heard her cry of surprise and then the snap of one of her hiking poles. Thankfully, there was no scream of pain. I came rushing back down the path to find Bonnie back on her feet, rubbing her palm, her shin, and holding a broken pole. I'm not mechanically minded, but I did attempt to magically reconnect the two pieces. But it was limp and lifeless, never to support again. Bonnie told me to get back climbing, and she followed behind me with her remaining pole. Now, I love my hiking poles, and I've walked over 2,000 miles with them. They save my back on the inclines, my knees on the declines, and they help me keep my rhythm on the straightaways. They also help keep my hands from swelling, which happens when you swing your hands below your waist when you walk. Just try to remove your ring after a 5-hour hike without poles and you'll understand. While the views on yesterday's Camino stage were glorious, the gradients and the terrain were both nasty, up and down, and Bonnie was in for a difficult day. I tried finding her another walking stick, showing her one that would have made Gandalf proud. No, Dad, I don't need it. Please put it down. I kept checking on her. She said she was okay, just bruised, including her ego. I asked her if it was more difficult going up. She said she was walking slower because she had to be more careful now. I appreciated that. I asked her if it was more difficult going down. She responded that she was taking smaller steps and she would shift the remaining pole from hand to hand when needed. And then later she told me she held it most in her left hand because of the bruise. I moved on ahead of her, getting to the top of a clearing because I wanted to strategize how to get her a new pair of poles. I tried to think of our upcoming stops where it would be the quickest and easiest way to get a delivery. I logged on to Amazon.es, the Spain site, to select a pair, and just then Bonnie arrived and she said, Dad, I'm trying to find the value in walking with one pole. I think there is a reason for this happening today, and I'm processing that right now. So I closed the browser without saying anything to her, and I acted like I was just taking a photo of the mountains. I kept checking on her throughout the day. She never complained. In fact, she shared how grateful she was that her pole had done its job. It took the brunt of the fall, and it broke instead of her. She never once played the victim, nor did she let it affect our day. But I did let it affect mine. After arriving in town, we cleaned up and we walked to the monastery to attain our final stamp on our Levaniego credentials, to receive our certificate of completion, and to visit the cross in the chapel. I had an interesting prayer time sitting in a pew a few feet away from what the Catholic Church believes to be pieces of the actual cross that Jesus was crucified on. Whether it actually is or isn't didn't matter to me at the moment. I found myself deeply moved by sacrifice, by empathy, and love. These days, I don't hold tightly to some of the same catechisms that I was raised with regarding the cross. They hold up about as well as my hiking pants are today. Anyways, I came to the cross yesterday with a list of cares, mostly about people that I care about. But I didn't think that either the symbolism of the cross or the literal thing was affixed to those needs. So instead, I prayed for presence, I prayed for hope, and I prayed for love. And I left feeling heard. And I left that place feeling comforted. And I left that place not feeling alone. On the walk back to the village, I told Bonnie I wanted to stop in one of the local shops to see if I could find a replacement scallop shell for the one that had broken on the back of my backpack. While we didn't find a shell, miracle of miracles, I found hiking poles. Bonnie was not interested at first, but with some prodding, she left the store with 2 new hiking poles, and I was relieved. Today was a longer stage than yesterday with even more elevation. We had new energy after a great night of sleep, and we flew up the inclines through a glorious forest of oak, chestnut, and beech trees. We had quiet times of reflection as well as meaningful discussions. I was about to praise her for changing her mind about getting the new poles, and in doing so, patting myself on my backpack, when she said something startling. You know, Dad, I really was fine just using one pole. Well, then why did you agree to buy the new ones? I guess it was mostly for you. I knew that you weren't okay with me having just one pole, and that you wouldn't be fully present until it was resolved. I bought the poles so that you could move forward. Ouch. That's what got us talking about fixing people, and how often our altruistic motives are honestly more about our own comfort than truly about how others are doing. Maybe our meddling isn't helping. In reality, it could be pushing them away. We need to let go of our false sense of control and thinking we know best, because what they really need is to feel heard, to be comforted, and not to feel alone.
Some lessons of the cross there.
That was the lessons of the cross for me, and that was my interaction with Bonnie and what I learned that day, and that has stuck with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Chad. It's a really personal story.
Thanks for letting me read it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Well, I have one more question, and then I want to open it up for questions from the group. So, if someone is thinking about putting together, let's call it a connector Camino with all these different routes, do you have any advice for someone thinking of tackling something like this?
Yeah, this is definitely one that I would suggest connecting with people who have done it before.
Okay.
We were so glad that we had watched some YouTube videos with people who had recently done this path. There was a day that they stretched longer because they thought it was going to make it easier for them. And they found that things were closed and they didn't have the support they needed. And from their input, it changed the way Bonnie and I put it together. And that happened several times along the way. And so, I reached out to them afterwards and told them how helpful their videos were in getting us safely over that pass and over those mountains. And that's what I would suggest is that, sometimes we tell people, oh, just go and don't watch the videos. Don't
Right.
don't read somebody else's book, just go experience it.
Yeah.
And I would say on this route, it probably is a good idea to do more research, to know what you're getting into, and to make sure you're prepared for it.
Mm. Do you have a sense that some of the people you met were first time pilgrims, or were these more people who are very experienced hikers, backpackers, pilgrims?
Nobody that uh, I met with was it their first one. We did meet one lady that she walked about 3 days in and decided she wasn't prepared for it yet and decided she was going to go home and finish getting ready so that she could do this whole route.
Okay. We haven't talked about how long they are. Would you do the rundown of how long each of those routes are?
Yeah, the Lebanyego takes about 3 to 5 days to get from the coast to the monastery,
Okay.
and um, Bonnie and I did it in the 3 days. But like I said, uh, we stopped based on where we got good information for.
Okay.
And because there's a lot of elevation up and down, most people do that in 4 days. And then the next path, I believe, was 9 days, the Variance.
Okay.
And that you get over the rest of the mountains. And then the last few days, you are walking on the northern part of the Meseta, where you're coming into close to Leon,
Oh,
which is just
wow.
beautiful to walk back into that.
Oh, lovely. And you're walking also into that familiarity. Maybe it feels like it's going
Yes,
to catch you and hold you.
yes, yeah,
Oh,
that was very
lovely.
that was very nice. And so I would encourage people if they are doing the Norte, even if they don't want to walk this route, that maybe they take a diversion and spend and plan into their trip the days where they could go up to this monastery to see this.
Hmm.
So I have a friend who recently did the Norte, and that was the thing. He just didn't have the time to go there. And so he took a bus from the coast and went to the monastery and got to have a very neat experience there and then bus back up to the Norte.
Okay, so you don't have to walk. You can get public
You
transportation.
can get public transportation.
Hmm.
If
Okay.
it is important for you to visit the monastery and to
Yeah.
see this relic, that's a very possible thing to do. If you've got
Okay.
the time and you can walk it, that's beautiful too. So, and then what some people do is if they're doing the Norte, they will go ahead and divert off and they will walk there, but they don't want to walk back. So they'll take a bus back to the Norte and then continue on their way that way.
Got it. Okay.
I'm not sure what the numbers were last year, but in 2021, I read there were only 200 people that did the Variance route.
Hmm.
So that shows you that connecting route isn't well traveled.
Okay.
But that's one of the fantastic things about walking into this little village where they're not used to seeing that many pilgrims, and
Yeah.
they celebrate you
Oh,
and they want to know where you started and where you're from. And it was definitely a different experience from being on the Francés where they're used to, you know, 200 pilgrims, in their last hour. not
Right.
200 pilgrims all year.
Right. Oh gosh. It sounds really charming. Yeah, it's tempting. Tempting.
It was so precious. I'm so glad
Oh,
that we had that experience.
love it. Love it.
I will tell you one other thing that we did was really fun is so basically a day and a half after the monastery is Fuente Day, and it is the national park for the Picos de Europas. And at the base of that is one of the very nice hotels. What do they call those? Paradors.
Yeah.
There's a parador there. Now it
Okay.
is not a fancy parador. Um, it was only about $100 a night. So it's the first and only parador that I've stayed in. But it's the only place locally there. And right outside it is a cable car that will take you up into the mountains. And so we scheduled a day off in the national park, stayed at the Parador, dropped our pack off there, and on our day off went on a hike. So it was great to get the cable car up to the top, and then we walked the, I don't know, 16, 17 kilometers down, and getting to see all of the wild animals and the peaks and the views. It was just fantastic. And I'm still pinching myself that I got to experience that.
It sounds amazing.
It's a hidden jewel.
I love that you walked on your day off.
Yeah,
Of course you did.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
As pilgrims do.
Yes.
Well, let's take some questions from people. So let me just open up the floor. Anyone have any questions for Chad? If you want to just unmute yourself and jump on in. Claire, looks like you're jumping in. Good. Go for it. Oh, and actually, would you identify yourself by name and where you're calling in from, please?
My name is Claire, and I'm calling in from Southern California.
Hi, Claire.
Hi, Chad. Chad, I have so many questions for you.
Yay.
I'm interested about your decision to start in Lisbon. Most of the people that we talk to or who have walked the Camino actually start in Porto, and some books actually discourage the Lisbon to Porto because it's also less supported, it seemed like, and I would like to have your thoughts about that.
Yeah. So doing the Camino was additionally my wife's idea, and she had wanted to do it for a very long time. And it wasn't until we watched The Way together, the movie, that I had a picture in my mind of what it was. And so that's when we started planning together to do it. And we had a friend who had done the Norte. And when we talked to her about it, when she had finished the Norte journey, she went to Portugal, and she was our hairstylist. I know it doesn't look like I need a hairstylist, but having a good hairstylist, it's cheap therapy, and and so she told us that we would really love the country of Portugal, and so it just felt right. So we decided that was the Camino that we were going to do, and so I got online and looked at it, and I said, "Well, Jamie, we could do the Portuguese, and it would be about 2.5 weeks." And her comment was, Chad, I've wanted to do this for over 20 years. That's not long enough. And so I said, well, we could start in Lisbon and it would take us about 5. And she said, okay. So that was why we picked that route. So we did not have any experience going into it. And it was middle to late August when we started. So it was very hot, and we were doing long days there. It certainly had longer stretches at the beginning out of Lisbon. So what we ended up doing was we just planned more days off towards the beginning of our trip, but we stayed in these delightful, delightful towns in that journey, and we fell in love with Portugal. So when I hear people talk about, oh, it's not well supported or whatever, that was the section where we fell in love with the Camino. We fell in love with the people. We fell in love with that country. We fell in love with the pastries. I don't think we ate the same pastry every day all the way up to Porto. And I would never discourage people to do it. but I would encourage them maybe to take more days off at the beginning if their stages are longer.
Great. Thank you. Paul, let's have your question next, please.
Okay, I was wondering, you talked about those connector routes, Chad. Do you have any experience at all with I think it's called the El Salvador route that goes from Leon to Oviedo? And, did you consider it? I think it's one of the more well-known connector ones. And, do you have any experience and any idea how that might compare to the ones you did?
Yeah, I have not done that one yet. I would very much like to do that one out of Leon. But what I do know is that it is better traversed going from Leon up to Oviedo. And so one of these days, that's what I would like to do, is starting from Leon, travel north to Oviedo, and then back down over the Primitivo. And in fact, the saying that the locals use there is you have to first go see the Savior doing the El Salvador route before you can go visit his disciple, James, in Santiago. So that is the direction that they expect you to go. So I've not really heard of anyone that has gone the other way from the Norte, from Oviedo down to Leon. I do know that that is also a strenuous route, and again, not very well supported in terms of as many places to stop or to stay. A little more primitive.
Thank you.
All right. Claire in New Zealand, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say how much I really enjoyed that story of the trekking poles. That was really wonderful, how she bought them to make you feel more comfortable.
Isn't that something? She says some very wise things for her age. Another one she told me that meant so much, that the year that we did the Primitivo together, while I was walking the Portuguese coastal, people that had walked the Primitivo asked me how long I had planned for. And I told them, I think we're going to take 12 days to do it. And I had several of them say, I did it in 14. And then I looked at my schedule and realized I'd only given us 9 days to do it.
Whoops.
And so I was a little concerned. So I told Bonnie that. I said, hey, I might have got us into a pickle here. We only have 9 days to do this whole route. And her response was, Dad, the only thing we have to do those days is walk. And I just loved that simplicity. And that's how we took it, is we would just rest when we needed to rest. And we did a lot of walking, and we had just a fabulous time together. Enough so that she wanted to go do the whole Norte with me. But I think about that a lot. All we've got to do is go out and walk.
Perfect. Other questions for Chad? Claire, you want to come back on and ask your question?
Sure, but I have a lot of questions for you. Let's go back to the breast cancer survivor and your preparation to be a guide on the Francés.
I am very excited about what we were able to develop for a 2-week walk, and I had really wanted to do it this year. Unfortunately, the organization that I was going to do it with had to pull out. So we had already advertised it, and I had people that were very interested in doing it. And it was a real blow to me to have that vision, for now, die. And I've really dealt with the loss of that. And there were 2 ladies in particular that I was very excited to take on. In fact, I almost, when the other organization I was working with, when they told me that they were not going to be able to support it, I thought that I would just do it myself, which I could do. It would just take a little bit more effort. And then one of the gals unexpectedly passed away. And one of the other ones, she developed a different cancer and had to go into treatment. And so I just realized it was something I had to let go right now. And, I work as a hospice chaplain, and I deal with grief a lot. And I lost my own dad 6 months ago. And I'm finding that the loss of people, especially if you're someone of faith and have belief in an afterlife and what's next, I realized that I was grieving the loss of my friends and even my dad differently than I was dealing with the death of a dream, because I don't know that there's really a heaven for dreams. And so I've not been sure what to do with that. And so I've been navigating that loss. So part of that is deciding to go on another Camino myself. And so this year, I'm actually going to go on Good Friday. I'm going to fly to Sevilla, and I'm going to walk the Via de Plata and the San Andreas Camino, and I'll leave Easter morning right after Mass, because I need some resurrection in my life. And so this is symbolic for me, and I'm looking forward to the solitude that's on this route, and I'm looking forward to processing a lot and grieving and figuring out what's next. So I'm hoping that that we get to pick that up again someday. This wasn't just going to be a walk with people that had gone through breast cancer, but it was going to be a directed healing walk where there was a program that we put together. And I'm pretty passionate about it. And so we'll see what happens in the future. But I found lovely places to stay, and I have this really fun agenda of what I'd like to see us accomplish, and it's there if it gets resurrected. Thank you for asking me.
I can't think of anyone who would be better for leading that type of a program, Chad, from what I know of you. Yeah.
Thank you, Nancy. That's kind.
I hope that dream stays alive.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful imagery to think about, starting a walk on Easter morning and walking into new life and resurrection. Yeah. Pilgrimage has become a very special spiritual practice for you, hasn't it?
It really has been. You know, I'm so grateful for my wife that she had this vision for us to do this, and what it's done for me. I know my boss wasn't real excited when I told her that instead of being gone 3 weeks on the breast cancer walk, now I was wanting 6 to go walk on the longest Camino route that I have done to this point. But I think she could tell that I needed it,
Mm-hmm.
and that it benefits me, and she's investing in me by letting me go. So I appreciate that.
Ah, beautiful. Any more questions for Chad? Yeah, Richard, please. And then Maurice.
So, Chad, I'm also, Claire and I are a husband and wife, so I'm calling from Southern California as well. So, throughout the conversation that you and Nancy have had, you've been talking about the infrastructure on the connecting routes, and you used the term how you put it together, you and Bonnie. You used the word put it together. And I'm connoting from that you actually planned out your stops, your stages, and the places that you stayed. Did you find that easy to do, or did you walk from Albergue to Albergue and hope for the best, or did you do any wild camping? Can you talk a little bit about your overnighting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I thought maybe since there wouldn't be as many people on this route, that this might be one of those times where I could challenge myself and just walk until I was done. But that was one of the things I got from the people on YouTube that had done this route and talked about it, that you need to be a spreadsheet pilgrim when you take some of these stages that aren't as well traveled, to know that there are places there to stay and what the options are, and if they're open or not, even to the place of looking where you may want to eat. And so, I definitely have been a spreadsheet pilgrim in the past, and I was on that section of the trip, and that's what I would suggest. That's what I would suggest for somebody. One of these days I'll do the Francés, where I'll just take me and my sticks and just walk. But that is not one I would suggest doing that on.
Okay.
Yeah. And the best place I found to get that information of what's available there is the website Bronze. and they support both of those paths and information for the places that are there. And I found that very reliable. And their app was the one that I was able to pull up and see where we were if we ever, were concerned about that. It worked very well.
Great. I'll have that in the show notes so people can refer to that, gronze.com. Thanks. Great. All right. Maurice, you have a question. You want to go ahead?
Hi, Chad. Maurice from Asheville, North Carolina. Given that you were on less traveled routes, did you and Bonnie have to know Spanish very well to communicate with the people in the towns and villages?
I am so lax at my Spanish, and I wish that I knew it better. And I know Bonnie wishes that she did as well. We used our Google Translate app when we needed to, and that was our fallback. But I've got some pretty funny stories of charades with people along the way, both Spanish and, from other countries that we came across, where your desire is to communicate with them and you figure out a way to do it. But I definitely need to learn more Spanish.
Excellent. Paul, back to you.
Paul from San Antonio. Just wondering, you mentioned that your wife did that one with you from Porto, and then you've been talking a lot about going with your daughter Bonnie. Has your wife been done some of these subsequent ones with you since, or was it one and done for her, or what?
No, that's a great question, Paul. Thanks for asking. She actually, when she came home, she got a new job. She trained CNAs for Job Corps, and she has not felt that she could leave her students during the summer when I go. And she's going to be retiring at the end of the year. And so she plans to start doing Caminos again. And so Bonnie and I talked that we're saving the rest of that Norte trip. We actually saved our credentials from the Norte. We started a new one when we took the off route on the Lebaniego. We started a new one. So because we want to come back and pick up where we left the Norte and finish it. And Jamie's going to do that one with us.
Nice. And just a follow-up question on the breast cancer people, that was going to be 2 weeks. Where were you going to walk? What was your destination, your starting point and ending with that one? What was it going to be?
Yeah, from Leon to Santiago in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Chad, could you say real quick what a CNA is in case people don't know?
Yeah, it's a certified nursing assistant. So these are the people who go in and help the nurses with a lot of the physical cares with patients.
Great.
And so she's at the end of her nursing career and is now giving back by training people how to go in and take care of others.
Lovely.
With Jamie getting ready to, retire, and the girls, Bonnie's also in school for her social work degree right now. And so next year, everybody's going to be kind of in transition again. And they've talked about doing We've talked about doing a family vacation because it's been a long time since we've all done one together. And I think we're going to go spend 2 weeks in Germany next year, between the time Bonnie finishes her BA in social work and where she picks up her MA program a month later. And so while we were talking about that the other day, I said, 2 weeks in Germany, we're pretty close. We could just go over and you could all do the English together with me. That's just a week. And then I waited for the pushback and there was none. So I am hopeful. I am praying that maybe the 6 of us would do the English together and
Amazing.
be able to be on the Camino at one time.
Amazing. I just love the way your face lights up when you talk about your family, Chad.
Wouldn't that be fun?
That'd be amazing. We're going to need the dates because we're going to crash your party.
That'd be great. We'd love that.
Very good. Well, Chad, let me ask you one more question to wrap this up. Is there anything you'd like to share about your most recent pilgrimage or the one coming up or anything about pilgrimage in general? But I just haven't asked you the right question yet.
Yesterday I was out walking and I think there's this thing that we've called Camino magic.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the reasons that you've started La Terraza after people get back, is because we want to take these things that we've learned, the magic that we've experienced out on the Camino, and we want to bring it home.
Yeah.
And there's a stretch here in Boise that I like to walk on the green belt next to the river. And for the past 4 years, when I get done with work and I go take a walk, I noticed some of the same people. And there's one guy who, to me, he looks like Jesus. He's got long hair, it's in a bun, he's got olive skin, he walks like he's peaceful. And I thought there's just something about him. And yet we're crossing paths with each other, and we always acknowledge each other, but we've never really talked. And I pointed him out to Jamie and said, one of these days I'm going to have a conversation with him. And yesterday I realized he had just started walking about a minute before I did on the same path. And I thought, well, we've got the same gait. I probably won't catch up to him, because if I did, I'd probably say something to him today. And then he stopped and I caught up to him. And so I started talking to him, and I asked him how long he walked. And then he asked me how long I'd walked, and we shared each other's names. And he's always wanted to do the Camino.
Of course.
And he had questions, and we walked together for 2 hours. And he's an English teacher here in Boise, and he's got one class that he's going to have this summer that he can do online. And we basically figured out how he could walk the Francés starting in June and do his class and get it paid for by doing this summer class. And he said, all of my fears and all of my reasons for not doing it, you've dissipated in this walk. And he was going home to go plan his Camino.
Love it.
And so just my encouragement that we get to bring that home with us, and we still get to make those connections. And it's not always with walking, but it can be. And it just means we have to put ourselves out there. And with the same way that we would greet somebody out there on a Camino path, we can greet people here, and we can see what magic's going to follow.
I love it. Love it. That's a wonderful way to wrap this up. Chad, thank you so much for joining me again. And I want to say thank you to everyone who we'll call it the audience, but the gallery, who's been listening in and asking your questions. I think you really have made this a richer conversation. So thank you, everyone.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for everyone for joining us today.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.